The night I asked a stranger if I could sit at his table was the night my life stopped belonging to fear. It was raining so hard the sidewalks outside the restaurant looked like rivers swallowing the curb, and my sneakers were soaked through by the time I pushed open the glass door of Romano's on Fifth. I didn't belong there. Women in silk dresses laughed beneath crystal chandeliers. Men in tailored suits checked watches that probably cost more than my car. I was just Claire Bennett, 29, single mom, waitress on my night off because the babysitter canceled and Lily was asleep at my neighbor's apartment down the block. I only came in to get out of the storm. That's what I told myself. The hostess said there were no empty tables. I nodded like I understood, like I wasn't already calculating how many dollars were left in my checking account, how many hours until my next shift. That's when I saw him. One table. One man. Alone. He sat near the back, away from the noise, black suit fitted like it had been made for him, shoulders broad, posture effortless. The kind of man who didn't look around to see who was watching because he already knew they were. The candlelight caught the sharp line of his jaw, the faint silver at his temples, even though he couldn't have been older than his mid-30s. His eyes were steady, unreadable, the color of deep water before a storm. I don't know what made me walk toward him. Maybe it was exhaustion. Maybe it was the way no one else dared approach that table. I stopped a few feet away, heart pounding loud enough I was sure he could hear it over the piano music drifting from the corner. "Can I sit here?" My voice sounded smaller than I meant it to. He looked up slowly, like he'd been expecting me. Not surprised. Not annoyed. Just certain. The room seemed to quiet without anyone realizing it. He studied me in a way that wasn't crude, wasn't dismissive. It felt like being measured, not for beauty, but for truth. Rainwater dripped from the hem of my jacket onto polished marble. For a second I almost apologized and turned to leave. Then he spoke. "Sit," he said, his voice low, controlled, the kind that didn't need volume to command attention. I exhaled, in relief, but before I could thank him, he added, "But you're not leaving after." It wasn't loud. It wasn't threatening. It was simply stated, like a fact already decided. A chill slid down my spine, and I couldn't tell if it was from the rain or from him. I should have laughed it off. I should have said I had somewhere to be. Instead, I pulled out the chair and sat across from Ethan Callahan, though I didn't know his name yet. I only knew that every man in the restaurant glanced toward our table and then quickly looked away. And for the first time in months, I felt something unfamiliar settle in my chest. Not fear. Not exactly. Something steadier. Like the seat I had just taken had never been empty at all. The waiter approached our table with a stiffness that did not match the soft piano music drifting through the restaurant, his eyes flicking once to the man across from me before lowering respectfully. "Your usual, sir?" he asked. The man nodded without looking at the menu. "And for you?" The waiter turned to me, polite but cautious, like I had stepped into reserved territory. I glanced at the prices printed in elegant script and felt heat crawl up my neck. "Just coffee," I said. "Black." The man's gaze lifted slightly. "She will have dinner," he corrected calmly. "And something warm. She is freezing." It was not a suggestion. I opened my mouth to argue, but something in his expression told me it would be pointless. Not because he would force me, because he already knew I needed it. The waiter disappeared as quickly as he had arrived. Silence settled between us, but it did not feel empty. It felt measured. He folded his hands loosely on the table, long fingers steady, a simple silver watch visible beneath his cuff. No flashy jewelry. No unnecessary movement. "You should not walk alone in this part of the city at night," he said. His voice carried no accusation, only observation. "I live 3 blocks away," I replied. "It is not that far." One corner of his mouth moved slightly, not quite a smile. 3 blocks can be far enough. I felt the familiar tension tighten in my shoulders. For months I had trained myself to scan rooms, to calculate exits, to listen for footsteps behind me. I did. Not like that he noticed. "I can take care of myself," I said, softer than I intended. His eyes held mine, not challenging, not dismissing. "I do not doubt that." The food arrived quickly, more quickly than it should have on a busy Friday night. A bowl of pasta steamed in front of me, rich with garlic and cream, bread still warm from the oven set beside it. My stomach betrayed me with a quiet sound. I had not eaten since noon. He watched me hesitate. "Eat," he said. I wrapped my fingers around the fork, telling myself I would only take a few bites. The warmth spread through me slowly, loosening something tight in my chest. Outside, rain streaked down the tall windows in silver lines. Inside, the world felt distant. "What is your name?" he asked after a moment. I swallowed. "Claire." I did not offer my last name. He did not press. "Claire," he repeated, like he was committing it to memory. "Do you always sit with strangers?" "Only when they look less dangerous than the storm outside," I answered before I could stop myself. For the first time, there was a flicker of amusement in his eyes. "And do I look less dangerous?" I considered lying. Instead, I shook my head slightly. No, the honesty hung between us. He leaned back in his chair, studying me again. But this time there was something different in his expression. Not calculation. Not possession. Protection. The word surfaced in my mind, uninvited. I pushed it away. I did not need anyone's protection. I had learned that lesson the hard way. "You are thinking about leaving," he said quietly. My grip tightened on the fork. "I have a daughter waiting for me." The words slipped out before I could decide whether to trust him with that truth. His gaze sharpened, not in suspicion, but in focus. "How old?" "5. "And who is with her?" "My neighbor. Mrs. Donnelly. She lives across the hall." I hated how defensive I sounded, like I needed to justify my choices. He nodded once. "Good." The simplicity of his approval unsettled me more than if he had criticized me. A vibration sounded softly from somewhere inside his jacket. He did not check it immediately. Instead, he held my gaze for a long second before reaching into his pocket and glancing at the screen. Whatever he read did not change his expression. He slipped the phone away. "You were followed here," he said, the words so calm I almost missed them. My pulse skipped. "That is not possible." "A gray sedan," he continued evenly, "parked across the street for 12 minutes. The driver never turned off the engine. The restaurant suddenly felt too warm." I pictured the walk from my apartment, the way I had been too focused on the rain to notice anything else. "You are mistaken," I whispered, though doubt had already begun to spread through me like cold water. His eyes softened just slightly. "I am rarely mistaken." My throat went dry. "Why are you telling me this?" He did not hesitate. "Because if you leave alone, whoever is waiting will follow again." The clink of glasses and murmur of conversation around us seemed to fade. My mind raced through possibilities I did not want to consider. He watched me carefully, not with impatience, not with dominance. With certainty. "You said I was not leaving," I murmured, the memory of his earlier words settling heavier now. He inclined his head slightly. "Not alone." The distinction changed everything. Fear pressed against my ribs, but beneath it, something steadier began to form. The feeling I had sensed when I first sat down. The sense that the seat had not been empty by accident. That maybe, just maybe, neither had I. For a moment I could not move. The word followed echoed in my mind louder than the piano, louder than the quiet hum of conversations around us. I tried to replay the last 15 minutes in my head, the walk from Mrs. Donnelly's apartment, the rush through the rain, the way I had wrapped my jacket tighter around myself and stared at the sidewalk instead of the street. I had not looked back. I had promised myself I would stop looking back. "Who is it?" I asked, and I hated how small my voice sounded. He did not answer immediately. He lifted his hand slightly, and I noticed it for the first time, the subtle shift in the air near our table. 2 men stood near the bar, dressed like any other customers, but their attention was not on the drinks or the television above the counter. It was on us. No, it was on him. They moved when he moved. They watched when he watched. "It does not matter who," he said calmly. "It matters that they think you are alone." A quiet tremor ran through me. "Maybe they are not waiting for me." "They are," he replied without hesitation. The driver stepped out once. He looked toward the entrance every time the door opened. He was not checking the weather. My pulse thudded in my ears. I forced myself to breathe slowly, the way I did when Lily had nightmares and needed me steady. "This is not your responsibility," I said. "You do not even know me." His gaze did not waver. "I know enough." I almost laughed at that, but there was nothing funny about the weight in his eyes. He reached into his jacket again, not for his phone this time, but for his wallet. He placed a black card on the table. The server appeared within seconds, as if summoned by something unspoken. The bill was settled without discussion. I stared at the ease of it, the efficiency, the way no one questioned him. "We will leave through the side entrance," he said. It was not a request. I hesitated. Every instinct told me not to follow a powerful stranger into a dark alley. But every instinct also reminded me that someone might already be waiting outside the front door. He stood, adjusting his jacket with a smooth motion. When he looked down at me, there was no impatience in his expression, only expectation. I pushed my chair back slowly and rose to my feet. The restaurant seemed to part around him as he walked, conversations lowering, eyes shifting away. I stayed close, not because he told me to, but because the space around him felt like the safest place in the room. The side hallway was quiet, lined with framed black and white photographs of old Manhattan streets. The lighting was softer here, shadows stretching long across polished floors. My heartbeat echoed in my ears. "If this is some kind of joke," I said quietly, "it is not funny." He stopped walking, turned to face me fully. We were close enough that I could see the faint lines at the corners of his eyes, the subtle mark near his temple that hinted at a past he did not speak about. "Claire," he said, and the way he said my name steadied me more than it should have. "I do not joke about safety." The door at the end of the hall opened before he touched it. One of the men from the bar held it for us, his expression respectful, focused. Outside, the rain had slowed to a mist. The air smelled clean, washed. A black sedan waited at the curb, engine running, headlights low and steady. My stomach tightened. "I am not getting into a car with you," I said immediately. He nodded once, as if he had expected that answer. "You will not," he replied. He gestured subtly across the narrow street. I followed his gaze and saw it then. A gray sedan parked half a block down, lights off now, but still there, still watching. My breath caught. The realization settled heavy in my chest. I had not imagined the tension in my spine these past weeks. I had not been paranoid. "You have two choices," he said evenly. "Walk toward that car alone, or let me make sure you reach your daughter safely." I thought of Lily's small hand wrapped around mine, the way she checked the door lock twice before bed because she had learned to be cautious too early. My fears sharpened into something clearer. "Why?" I asked again, because I needed to understand. His eyes softened just a fraction. "Because someone decided you were unprotected," he said quietly. "And I disagree." I did not realize I was holding my breath until the cold night air forced it out of me in a thin cloud. The mist clung to my hair and lashes, soft but relentless, like the kind of warning you only noticed after it soaked through your clothes. I stared at the gray sedan down the block, willing it to move, to prove him wrong, but it stayed exactly where it was. Still, waiting. My heart beat harder, not wild, but deliberate, each pulse echoing the truth I had tried to ignore for weeks. I had felt eyes on me before, outside the grocery store, in the parking lot near Lily's preschool. I had told myself it was leftover fear from a past I did not want to relive. Now I was not so sure. "They will not approach while I am here," Ethan said quietly. He did not raise his voice. He did not need to. The certainty in it was unshakable. "But if you walk alone, they will test you." I swallowed. "Test me for what?" His jaw tightened slightly, not in anger, but in calculation. "For vulnerability." The word landed heavier than any threat could have. Vulnerable. That was how the world saw single mothers. Overworked. Distracted. Easy to pressure. Easy to corner. I straightened my shoulders instinctively, as if posture alone could make me less of a target. "I am not helpless," I said. "I know," he replied immediately. "That is not the same as being protected." The black sedan idled beside us, steady and patient. The driver stepped out and opened the rear passenger door without speaking. No rush. No pressure. Just quiet readiness. I looked back at the restaurant door behind us. Warm light spilled onto the sidewalk, laughter drifting faintly into the damp air. A different world. Safe because it was public. Safe because it was temporary. "If I get in that car," I said slowly, "this becomes something more than dinner." Ethan's gaze did not leave mine. It already is. The honesty in his answer unsettled me more than any rehearsed reassurance would have. He was not pretending this was casual. He was not pretending I was random. I hated that part of me felt relieved by that. My phone buzzed in my coat pocket, sharp and sudden. I flinched. Ethan's eyes dropped briefly to the sound, then back to my face. "Answer it," he said. My fingers trembled slightly as I pulled it out. Mrs. Donnelly's name lit up the screen. I answered immediately. "Claire," she said, her voice warm but slightly concerned. "Lily just woke up asking for you. She is fine, but she says she had a bad dream." My chest tightened. "I am on my way," I promised. 5 minutes. I hung up and looked at Ethan. I do not have time for complicated. His expression shifted, something almost imperceptible softening at the mention of my daughter. Then do not make it complicated, he said. Let me make sure you get home. I glanced once more at the gray sedan. As if on cue, its headlights flickered on briefly, then off again. A signal. My stomach dropped. This was not imagination. This was intent. I stepped closer to Ethan without meaning to. The space between us felt charged, not with romance, not with danger exactly, but with decision. If this is about you, I said quietly, if someone is trying to reach you through me, I need to know. He held my gaze steadily. No one reaches me through anyone, he said. There was no arrogance in it. Just fact. But sometimes people miscalculate. The wind shifted, carrying the faint scent of rain and asphalt. My world had been small for so long. Work, home, Lily, survival measured in paychecks and preschool schedules. Now it felt like invisible lines had been drawn around me without my knowledge. I do not belong in your world, I whispered. His answer came without hesitation. Tonight, your world and mine are the same. I looked at the open car door, then at the gray sedan down the street, then back at him. He did not reach for me, did not guide me. He simply waited. And for the first time in a long time, I allowed myself to choose not from fear, but from clarity. I stepped toward the car. I slid into the back seat and the door closed with a quiet, solid sound that felt final in a way I could not explain. The interior smelled faintly of leather and rain, clean and controlled, nothing like the chaos that had defined most of my adult life. Ethan stepped in after me, the door shutting on the outside world, sealing us into a space that felt insulated from everything beyond the tinted windows. The driver pulled away from the curb smoothly, without urgency, without drawing attention. I watched through the glass as we passed the gray sedan. For a second, I caught the outline of someone in the driver's seat. Then we turned the corner, and it disappeared from view. My chest tightened, not from panic, but from the realization that if I had walked out alone, I would have been walking straight into that waiting shadow. They will not follow, Ethan said quietly, as if reading the tension in my shoulders. How can you be sure? I asked. He glanced toward the front of the car where the driver sat, focused and steady. Because they understand consequences. The word was calm, not dramatic, but it carried weight. I shifted in my seat, folding my hands together to hide the slight tremor in my fingers. You keep speaking like this is normal, I said. Like people waiting outside restaurants is just another Tuesday. His gaze softened just slightly. It is not normal. For you, he replied. That is why I am here. I looked down at my hands. You still have not told me why. Silence stretched for a few seconds, filled only by the muted hum of the engine and the faint patter of rain against the roof. Because someone has been asking about you, he said finally. The words landed slowly, sinking in piece by piece. Asking what? Your schedule. Where you work. Where your daughter goes to school. My heart stuttered painfully at that. That is not possible, I whispered. I am not important. His jaw tightened slightly. Importance is not the only reason someone is targeted. I stared at him, trying to read the lines of his face, the calm exterior that had layers I did not yet understand. Is this about you? I pressed again. Is someone trying to get to you through me? His eyes met mine steadily. No one uses children to reach me, he said, and there was something unyielding in his tone, something that made me believe that boundary was absolute. Then why Lily? My voice broke on her name before I could stop it. He leaned forward slightly, resting his forearms on his knees, closing the distance between us just enough that I could see the faint flecks of green hidden in his dark eyes. Because you refused someone, he said quietly. The air left my lungs in a slow, stunned breath. I did not need him to say the name. I saw it instantly in my mind. Mark, the man I had dated for 6 months. The man who did not like hearing no. The man who had shown up at my job twice after I ended things, smiling too calmly, asking too many questions. He would not. I started, but the doubt was already there. Ethan watched my expression change. He is connected to people who do not like rejection, he continued evenly. And when a woman chooses to walk away, some men decide to remind her of what she risks. I felt cold despite the warm air inside the car. He would not hurt Lily, I said, more to myself than to Ethan. Maybe not directly, Ethan replied. But fear is a tool. The word tool made something inside me snap into clarity. This was not random. This was not paranoia. This was strategy. Someone testing the edges of my life, seeing how much pressure it would take before I broke. I lifted my chin slowly. I will not go back to him, I said. Ethan's gaze did not waver. I know. The car slowed as we turned onto my street, the familiar row of brick buildings coming into view. The porch light outside my apartment flickered softly, casting a pale glow on the wet sidewalk. My world. Small. Ordinary. Precious. The driver stopped directly in front of my building. Ethan did not move to open the door immediately. Instead, he looked at me with an intensity that was not possessive, not controlling, but resolute. You will not walk into this alone again, he said quietly. I searched his face for manipulation, for hidden cost. I found none. Only certainty. And for the first time, the thought did not frighten me. It steadied me. I opened the car door before I could second-guess myself. The night air felt sharper now, cooler against my skin, like the world had shifted slightly while I was inside that quiet cocoon of leather and certainty. Ethan stepped out on my side instead of his own, not touching me, not guiding me, just placing himself between me and the street with an instinct that looked effortless. The driver remained behind the wheel, engine running, headlights dimmed. My apartment building looked the same as it always did. Brick faded from decades of weather, narrow steps leading up to a door that stuck in the winter. Ordinary. Safe. Or at least I had always believed it was. I can walk from here, I said softly. He studied the entrance, the windows above, the shadows along the sidewalk. I will walk you to the door. It was not dominance. It was finality. I did not argue. We crossed the few feet together, his stride unhurried, controlled. I became aware of how small my world must look to someone like him. 3 stories. 8 units. A flickering porch light that buzzed faintly. When we reached the door, I turned to face him. Up close, without the restaurant lights or the car interior softening his features, he looked even more composed. Not cold. Not distant. Focused. You do not need to do this, I said again, though the words carried less resistance than before. You are right, he answered calmly. I do not need to. The honesty in that response caught me off guard. He was not pretending obligation. He was choosing involvement. I unlocked the door and stepped inside, then paused. Something in me resisted letting the moment end without clarity. Will they come back? I asked quietly. His eyes held mine without hesitation. Not tonight. And tomorrow? A slight pause. Not uncertainty. Calculation. Tomorrow will be handled. The phrase was simple, but the confidence in it eased something tight in my chest. I had spent months bracing for the next unexpected knock, the next message, the next reminder that I had dared to say no. For the first time, the future did not feel like something I had to survive alone. Footsteps echoed lightly from the stairwell above. I looked up just as Mrs. Donnelly appeared at the top landing, Lily in her arms, wrapped in a pink blanket with tiny white stars. My daughter's sleepy eyes scanned the hallway until they found me. Mommy, she whispered, reaching out. I moved toward her immediately, taking her into my arms, breathing in the familiar scent of baby shampoo and warmth. Her small fingers curled into my jacket. You are late, she murmured against my shoulder. I know, sweetheart, I said softly. I am sorry. Lily's gaze drifted past me then, settling on Ethan. Children have a way of seeing without judgment, without assumption. She tilted her head slightly. Is he the man who made the rain stop? She asked, her voice thick with sleep. I almost smiled despite everything. Ethan did not laugh. He stepped slightly closer, but kept a respectful distance. I did not stop the rain, he said gently. But I made sure your mom did not walk in it alone. Lily considered that with solemn seriousness, then nodded once, as if he had passed some quiet test. Okay, she said, and rested her head back on my shoulder. I looked at Ethan differently then, not as a stranger in an expensive suit, not as a man who commanded quiet rooms and waiting cars, but as someone who understood the weight of what mattered. Thank you, I said, and this time there was no hesitation in it. He inclined his head slightly, accepting the gratitude without making it larger than it was. I will be nearby, he said quietly. Not a promise, not a threat. Into the night, the door closing softly behind him. I stood there for a long moment, holding Lily, listening to the faint hum of the engine outside before it finally pulled away. And for the first time in a long time, when I locked the door behind me, I did not feel like I was locking fear inside with us. I felt like something had shifted. like someone had drawn a line the world was no longer allowed to cross. I did not sleep much that night. Lily curled against my side in my narrow bed, her small hand resting over my heart as if she could feel the difference in its rhythm. The apartment was quiet except for the old radiator clicking every few minutes and the faint hum of traffic 3 stories below. Normally those sounds comforted me. They meant routine. They meant ordinary life. But as I stared at the ceiling, I kept replaying the evening in my mind. The gray sedan. The way Ethan had said consequences without raising his voice. The certainty in his eyes when he promised tomorrow would be handled. I had built my life on self-reliance. I worked double shifts. I walked Lily to school and back. I memorized emergency contacts and backup plans. Depending on someone else felt dangerous. And yet, when he said he would be nearby, something in me believed him. Morning came pale and slow. I dressed Lily for preschool, smoothing her blonde hair into 2 neat braids while she told me about a dream involving a purple dragon who lived in our mailbox. I smiled and nodded, grateful for the simplicity of her world. She grinned at me. I am always brave. I watched until she disappeared inside, then turned to head toward the bus stop for my shift at the diner. That is when I saw him. Not Ethan. Mark. He stood across the street near the newspaper stand, hands in his jacket pockets, posture relaxed in a way that felt practiced. Too casual. He smiled when our eyes met. The sight of him did not spark longing or nostalgia. It sparked memory. The late-night messages. The way he had shown up unannounced. The subtle shift from charm to control when I began pulling away. I felt my spine straighten. I did not cross the street. I did not approach. I simply stood there, forcing my voice to remain steady when he called out. Claire, we need to talk. The words echoed with an entitlement I had once mistaken for intensity. There is nothing left to say, I replied, keeping my distance. He tilted his head slightly, studying me. You have been hard to reach. A faint smile touched his lips. New friends. My pulse quickened. He knew. Or he suspected. My life is not your business, I said. His expression flickered for a second, irritation barely contained before he smoothed it away. You think you can just walk away from people like that? He asked quietly. The emphasis on people was deliberate. Back again, measuring, recalculating. He had always relied on intimidation wrapped in charm, on making me doubt my own reactions. But standing there on the sidewalk in full daylight, with commuters passing and the preschool door still propped open behind me, the script felt different. There is no problem, Mark said finally, smoothing his tone. Claire and I just have unfinished business. Ethan stepped slightly closer, not touching me, not blocking my view, but positioning himself in a way that made the space around me feel deliberate instead of exposed. If there is business, Ethan replied evenly, it can be handled respectfully. The word respectfully landed like a boundary drawn in permanent ink. Mark's jaw tightened for a split second before he forced a small laugh. You must be the new friend, he said. You should be careful getting involved in things you do not understand. I felt my pulse quicken, but this time it was not fear. It was clarity. There is nothing to understand, I said firmly. I ended things. That is the end. Mark looked at me like he was trying to decide whether I meant it. Maybe for the first time, he saw that I did. He shifted his weight, glancing briefly at Ethan's car parked a few yards away. The engine was off now. Another man stood near it, hands folded calmly in front of him, eyes scanning the street with quiet focus. No aggression, just awareness. Mark exhaled slowly. You think you can just erase people? He asked, his voice lower now. You think walking away means there are no consequences? I held his gaze without stepping back. Walking away means I choose peace, I said. And you do not get to redefine that. Ethan did not interrupt. He did not speak over me. He let my words stand on their own. That, more than anything, shifted the balance. Mark's confidence faltered slightly. He glanced once more at Ethan. You do not know who you are standing next to, he said quietly, almost as a warning. I finally turned my head enough to look at Ethan. He did not appear threatened. He did not appear eager. He appeared resolved. I know enough, I said before Ethan could respond. Mark studied me for a long moment, as if searching for the hesitation he used to exploit. When he did not find it, something hardened in his expression. This is not over, he said. The words were meant to linger, to unsettle. But this time they did not land the same way. It is, Ethan replied calmly. Not louder, not sharper, just final. Mark's gaze locked with Ethan's for a beat too long. Then he stepped back, adjusting his jacket with a forced casualness. "Take care of yourself, Claire," he said, and turned away, walking down the sidewalk without looking back. I stood still until he disappeared around the corner. Only then did I realize how steady my breathing was. No shaking hands. No racing thoughts. Just a quiet awareness that something fundamental had shifted. Ethan moved slightly to face me fully. "Are you all right?" he asked. I nodded. "Yes." The word felt honest. He searched my face as if confirming that answer for himself. "He will not approach you again," he said. "How can you be sure?" I asked, not doubting him, but needing to understand the foundation of that certainty. His eyes met mine steadily. "Because he has now been seen." The phrase was simple, but I understood its weight. Mark operated in shadows. In private conversations. In closed doors. Being confronted openly, in daylight, stripped him of that quiet leverage. I exhaled slowly. The morning sun broke through the clouds above us, light reflecting off wet pavement in small silver flashes. For months I had carried tension like armor. Now it felt lighter. Not gone, but shared. "You did not have to come," I said softly. "You knew he would be here." Ethan did not deny it. "Yes," he answered. "Why?" I asked again, needing to hear it plainly. His expression did not shift. "Because you are no longer unprotected." The certainty in his voice was not possessive. It was declarative. And standing there on that ordinary sidewalk, with the world moving around us as if nothing extraordinary had happened, I realized something unexpected. Protection did not feel like a cage. It felt like space. And for the first time in a long time, I felt free enough to breathe. The rest of the morning moved as if nothing extraordinary had happened, and that was what made it feel extraordinary. I went to work. I poured coffee into thick ceramic mugs and wiped down counters that smelled like syrup and fried bacon. Customers complained about traffic and gas prices and the weather, finally clearing up after 3 straight days of rain. The world continued in its ordinary rhythm, unaware that something invisible had shifted in mine. Around noon, my phone buzzed in the pocket of my apron. I almost ignored it out of habit, but the name on the screen made my breath pause. Unknown number. I stepped into the back hallway near the storage shelves before answering. "Claire Bennett," a calm male voice asked. "Yes. This is Officer Daniels with the Midtown Precinct. I am calling regarding a report filed this morning." My heart thudded once hard. "What kind of report?" "A restraining order request submitted by Mr. Mark Harris. It appears he has voluntarily agreed to cease all contact with you and your minor child." I leaned against the wall to steady myself. "Voluntarily," I repeated. "Yes, ma'am. The paperwork indicates he understands that any attempt to approach you will result in immediate legal consequences." Legal consequences. The phrase echoed in my mind, familiar in its structure, calm in its delivery. "And that is it?" I asked quietly. "That is it," the officer confirmed. "If you experience any further issues, please contact us." The call ended. I stood there for several seconds, staring at the blank screen. No confrontation. No shouting. No dramatic ending. Just paperwork filed and lines drawn where they should have been drawn months ago. I walked back out to the counter in a daze. My coworker Jenna glanced at me. "You look like you just won the lottery," she joked. I almost laughed. It did not feel like winning. It felt like something heavy had been lifted without me having to carry it all the way to the finish line alone. When my shift ended, I stepped outside into the afternoon sunlight. The sky was clear now, blue stretching wide over the city like it had never stormed at all. Across the street, parked with unassuming stillness, was a familiar black sedan. The engine was off this time. No urgency. No display. Just presence. The passenger door opened, and Ethan stepped out, adjusting the cuff of his jacket as if he had simply been passing by. I walked toward him slowly, studying his expression. It was the same composed calm I had seen from the beginning. "You knew," I said quietly. He did not pretend confusion. "Yes. You arranged it." He held my gaze steadily. I made sure the appropriate conversations were had. I searched his face for pride or expectation. There was neither. Only resolve. "I did not ask you to do that," I said. "No," he agreed. "You did not." The honesty in his response disarmed me more than any denial would have. "Then why?" I asked, though I already felt the answer forming somewhere deeper than logic. He stepped slightly closer, not invading my space, but but closing the distance enough that his voice did not need to rise above the noise of passing traffic. Because you deserve to walk your daughter to school without scanning every parked car, he said evenly. You deserve quiet. Quiet. The word felt foreign on my skin, like something I had forgotten how to claim. For years I had equated strength with endurance, with surviving what was thrown at me. I had never considered that strength could also mean allowing someone to stand beside me without taking away my autonomy. This does not make me yours, I said softly, meeting his eyes with the steadiness I had learned the hard way. One corner of his mouth lifted slightly. No, he replied. It does not. The answer held no disappointment, no demand, just understanding. I studied him for a long moment. The man who could move conversations behind closed doors and still speak to my daughter with gentle clarity. The man who did not cage, but covered ground I had been forced to defend alone. I chose to sit at your table, I said finally. His gaze did not waver. And I chose not to let you leave unprotected. The traffic light changed behind us, cars rolling forward in smooth succession. Life continuing. For the first time, the future did not feel like something I had to brace for. It felt open, not because the world had softened, but because someone had decided my peace mattered. And as I stood there in the clear afternoon light, I realized something simple and undeniable. He did not rule my life. He guarded the space around it. And that made all the difference.